From a young age, every person feels emotions. The spectrum of emotions one experiences in a day might shift substantially as adults seek to manage the often tumultuous environment of modern living. People often take their capacity to perceive and react to their emotions for granted. They rarely pause to reflect and give careful attention to their inherent feelings. They don't think about how it affects their mental and physical being, or the long-term consequences of holding on to feelings that could be subsequently damaging. Here, emotions are being dissected, especially negative ones, to learn more about what causes them, how they affect individuals, and how people may use them to improve overall well-being. Since childhood, apprehension, suspicion, and uncertainties are present in the human mind. These negative emotions deplete human energy and make one less productive. One may notice a lack of drive to do something while in a negative emotional state. Negative affectivity, NA, also known as an adverse effect, is a personality trait characterized by negative feelings and low self-esteem. Several negative emotions comprise negative affectivity, including contempt, anger, guilt, disgust, anxiety, and apprehension. Low negative affectivity is marked by regular feelings of peace and serenity, and feelings of confidence, engagement, and enormous excitement. The negative emotional reaction varies in persons. The main personality element of anxiety, or neuroticism, which is included within the Big Five personality traits as emotional control, closely corresponds to negative involvement. The Big Five personality traits are generosity, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and acceptance. Neuroticism is a personality character that causes extreme mood swings, frequent melancholy, stress, and irritability, and it predicts the formation and beginning of all typical mental diseases. Negative affectivity has been linked to various features, including self-reported stress, poor coping abilities, health issues, and the recurrence of unpleasant occurrences. Excess weight and psychiatric problems are common side effects. Individuals with a high level of negative affectivity have a pessimistic attitude about themselves and the world surrounding them. Life pleasure is closely linked to negative affectivity. People with significant negative impacts have higher degrees of distress, worry, and discontent. They are more likely to focus on the bad elements of themselves, society, destiny, and other people, and recollect more negative past events. Because of the commonalities between these affective qualities and levels of happiness, some researchers regard both positive and negative thought processes as indications of the broader concept of subjective well-being. As illustrated by Stanley S. Seidner's work on negative arousal and white noise, negative affect arousal techniques can create negative emotional states. The researcher measured how Puerto Rican and Mexican individuals reacted to the downgrading of communicators of other ethnic backgrounds. Emotions include psychological experiences triggered by neurophysiological shifts and are correlated with thoughts, sensations, behavioral responses, and a level of pleasure or dissatisfaction. There is no scientific agreement on a definition at this point in time. Temperament, passion, mood, personality, attitude, and innovation are all connected with emotions. Emotional study has flourished in the last 2 decades, with contributions from a wide range of disciplines, including medicine, psychology, history, sociology of emotional traits, and computer technology. Countless hypotheses trying to explain the origin, functionality, and other elements of emotions have sparked greater research into the subject. The generation of materials that excite and evoke emotion is one of the current areas of investigation in the sphere of emotion. Furthermore, PET and fMRI scans facilitate the exploration of affective image scenarios in the human brain. From a scientific viewpoint, emotions can be defined as pleasant or negative feeling that is connected to a specific sequence of physiological activity. Physiological, behavioral, and cognitive modifications are all influenced by emotions. Emotions' original purpose was to encourage adaptive behaviors that would help carry genes through the process of survival, reproduction, and kin selection. Cognition, according to certain ideas, is a crucial aspect of emotion. Other hypotheses claim that emotion exists independently of intellect and can even come before it. A conceptual picture of emotion from a past or speculative experience related to a substantive state of pleasure or dissatisfaction is referred to as the cognitive treatment of emotion. Verbal interpretations of experiences that describe an internal state generates the content states. Emotions are a difficult thing to understand. Whether or not emotions create changes in human behavior is a subject of debate. Conversely, emotional physiology is intertwined with nervous system arousal. Emotion is also related to a person's propensity toward certain behaviors. Introverts are more prone to be social and communicate their emotions, whereas extroverted individuals are more inclined to be socially aloof and hide their feelings. Motivation is frequently fueled by feelings. Emotions, on the contrary, are essentially syndromes of abstract pieces, which may include motivation, feelings, behavior, and physiological adaptations. But none of these modules constitutes the emotion. These elements are not caused by emotional traits. Subjective view, cognitive functions, expressive behavior, psychophysiological attributions, and instrumental behavior are all constituents of emotions. Academics used to try to link each element to an emotion. Very recently, all the ingredients have been stated to compile an emotion. Relying on the academic discipline, the various emotional elements are classified differently. Emotion is defined as a subjective and cognitive experience, characterized primarily by psychophysiological exhibits, biological stimuli, and mental processes in psychology and philosophy. In sociology, a cross-description of emotion can be discovered. So, one can define emotions as physiological traits, cultural or emotional tags, apprehension, surprise, anger, etc., expressive physical behaviors, and the evaluation of circumstances and surroundings. According to several cross-cultural types of research, the classification of emotion, and for that matter basic emotions such as rage and anguish, are not universal, and various cultures describe the limits and realms of these conceptions differently. On the other hand, others think there are specific universal emotional grounds. Alexithymia is a term used in psychiatry and psychology to describe a person's incapacity to communicate or sense emotion. Humanity and the resulting bodily experiences have always sparked the interest of thinkers and philosophers. This concept has aroused the curiosity of both Western and Eastern communities in equal measure. Emotional states have long been linked to divine, mental, and physical enlightenment. Most Western philosophers, Aristotle, Descartes, Plato, Hobbes, and Aquinas, have placed a high value on the ever-changing activities of people and their mood fluctuations, leading them to suggest vast speculations, often competing ones, to explain the emotion and the subsequent catalysts of human action and their repercussions. Emotions, according to one theory, aid adaptive responses to environmental problems. Emotions are said to have evolved due to human ancestors' need for effective answers to ancient and ongoing issues. Emotions can be used to convey what is essential to someone, such as their ethics and values. However, some feelings, including anxiety, are sometimes considered a symptom of a mental disorder, and hence have a negative effect. Negative thoughts and emotions. An abridged introduction. Negative emotions and thoughts can be defined as any feeling that makes individuals sad and uncomfortable. These feelings make people despise themselves and others, and lower the level of confidence, self-esteem, and overall contentment. Hatred, rage, jealousy, and melancholy are examples of unpleasant emotions. It's critical to understand the difference between an emotion and a feeling. While the two are related, there is a significant distinction between them. Emotions. Emotions are considered lower-level reactions. They start in the brain's subcortical areas, like the ventromedial, amygdala, and prefrontal cortices. These zones are in charge of generating biological pathways that directly impact human well-being. Emotions like human fight-or-flight reflexes. These are programmed into human DNA and are believed to have evolved to help people respond swiftly to various environmental challenges. The amygdala has also been proven to play an important role in generating memory-enhancing neurotransmitters, which explains why emotional memories are frequently deeper and simpler to recall. Emotions are easy to evaluate objectively by physical signs such as heart rate, blood flow, brain activity, body language, and facial expressions because they have a firmer physical footing than feelings. Feelings. Emotions are said to be preceded by feelings, which are also human reactions to the many emotions being encountered. Feelings are far more subjective than emotions, which might have a more universal experience across all individuals. Unique human experiences and perceptions of reality are affected by those interactions. Feelings are the next phase in how people respond to emotions as humans, and occur in the neocortical areas of the brain. They can't be quantified the way emotions can, since they're more or less subjective. Range of human emotions: fear, anger, disgust, pleasure, surprise, melancholy, embarrassment, contempt, shame, guilt, amusement, contentment, pride, excitement, relief, satisfaction, pain, sensory pleasure. Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions is one of the most widely known cognitive theories of emotions. The 8 basic emotions are joy, trust, surprise, fear, sadness, expectation, anger, and displeasure. Plutchik took a step forward by combining emotions with their opposites and then building the emotional wheel, which illustrates how complicated and interactive human emotions are. Plutchik's wheel is a powerful visual illustration of how people express their emotions. It can be seen as someone moves along on the wheel. Subsequently, the core emotion drops. Plutchik also employed the color to convey emotional strength. The darker the color, the stronger will be the emotional impact. So, at its most extreme level, trust transforms into appreciation, and at its lowest level it becomes free acceptance. It's an excellent beginning point for learning more about how human emotions manifest themselves, how they vary, and how they might interplay with one another. It has influenced subsequent psychological studies in the field, and it is frequently used as the foundation around which scientists investigating emotions build their findings. Negative thoughts and emotions, research and studies. The excessive research done to fully comprehend human emotions has contributed to the availability of diverse information about the distinctions between positive and negative thoughts and the effects of each on not only mental but also overall physical well-being. Here are a few abstracts of the studies scientists came across when investigating the issue in terms of giving readers a better idea of the present scenario of negative emotions. The paradigm of feelings as information, established by Schwartz and Clore, 1996, conceptualized the role of inner emotions in how one forms judgments about surroundings. They proposed that emotions offer feedback on the safety of human surroundings and people's ability to deal with specific situations. In this regard, negative emotions are the most powerful indicator that something is wrong or that human safety may get inversely affected. Anxiety is frequently misunderstood as a negative feeling, although it is an essential mental layer for taking appropriate action. People sometimes find it tough to respond to conditions without this emotion, but it's essential to keep it under control because long-term anxiety can damage cognitive functioning. Rosen, Adler, and Silverstein, 1998, looked into the significance of negative emotions in the bargaining process. They observed that negotiators who couldn't manage or grasp two negative emotions, fear and anger, when they surfaced, were typically unable to manage the situation effectively, despite their preparation. In the perspective of mediation, related research findings have shown how multiple emotions, such as anger and appreciation, affect cognition and behavior. Biswas-Diener and Kashtan, 2014, authored a book about how unpleasant emotions can lead to self-encouragement. Negative emotions, they believe, act as a stimulus to help individuals address and improve their behavior and actions. Negative emotions and thoughts have also been researched concerning culture. Rosen, 1999, investigated perceptions of utter disrespect, anguish, and exasperation, and their implication on moral codes such as society, autonomy, and perfectibility in both Japanese and American communities. Appraisal theory has also explored negative emotions, particularly anger. People become enraged when they perceive an event or circumstance as personally significant to them, contradictory to their goals, and created deliberately by another person. The relevance of perception of prospective hazards is emphasized by appraisal theorists. Smith and Ellsworth, 1985, Lazarus, 1991, Roseman, 1991. Individuals may run into a situation when someone remarks about them and is unsure how to respond. They are still processing in their head what was just said about them. Is it possible that one has misread something? People may be telling themselves of these happenings. Often, it's a disparaging remark made about all and sundry one knows. Disrespect, wrath, frustration, agony, fury, and embarrassment are the feelings all have experienced as a result of the core offense. When people are alone or in a group at a social gathering, these reactions may crop up. When people are embarrassed by someone in a social setting, it may worsen. They may need to try to save face, which the Chinese term minzo, to save face, can be suitably attributed. If humans don't respond promptly and accurately, they can ensure that everyone present and who has witnessed what has happened will gossip about them. People are worried that this minor incident will resurface in the future. They will talk about what has transpired and speak about it for days, weeks, months, and maybe years in waiting. The talking will never fade. Negative thoughts and emotions, the trend and flow. To begin with, one must recognize that he cannot stop others from discussing things about him. Gossip is a natural dimension of human nature, and most people have a strong sense of self-righteousness. They believe that they are always correct, and it hurts their ego to believe that they are incorrect. Nobody enjoys being criticized or being disrespected. All humans yearn for affirmation, love, affection, and total acceptance. People appreciate being in the company of other individuals who make them feel vibrant. They make all feel like winners. One prefers to talk to these people all the time and seek their productive advice. One feels like he can trust them and disclose anything to them. These people make one feel the polar opposite of those who belittle him. The first step is to reach a point when nothing is said about one, written about one, or mentioned about one that causes discomfort. If one lets what others think and say about him to disturb the mental state, he is allowing them leverage to dictate terms. The subject in question allows others to rob him of his happiness, fulfillment, and enjoyment. He is allowing what they think and say about him to steer his destiny. He has no control over what others say and how he should respond. The said individual has no power over how professionally or unprofessionally he must behave. One should remember that negative thoughts breed more negativity, whereas happiness begets more positivity. If people reply negatively, they will attract more negativity. If people can show others that their statements don't disturb them, that their words don't influence them, and won't make them sad or furious, then their words lose power. One must erect armor, a force bubble, to protect him from negativity. It may take some time, effort, and practice to do this, but it may work wonders with persistence. Mud has been flung in the faces of LeBron James, Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, and many other famous people, with defamatory and insulting comments, declarations, placards, and offensive stickers manufactured against them. Despite the onslaught, they calmly continued working and moving toward their purpose, their intent. It's not always simple, but one must not let what others do or say influence him to the point when he abandons his ambitions. Once an individual is successful at anything, or maybe it's because one got a job promotion when others didn't, others are often resentful of the favor one has received. Someone may put their trust in him, and other colleagues believe that favor should have gone to them. They should have gained what he got. They are spiteful, angry, or envious because of the honor that was bestowed upon the chosen one. Maybe the beneficiary did something accidentally and didn't intend any harm. Maybe he thought it was no major concern, but the other person did mean otherwise, and now the recipient is being chastised for it, even if he has made an error in judgment, which almost all have done at some juncture. Negative thoughts and emotions. How to overcome them. Building a solid defense. Individuals should learn how to construct self-barriers. If people have a sturdy wall, a robust inner wall, and when someone says something negative about them, it's like throwing a rock at them, and it rightly bounces back. If the abstract wall is weak, the rock will pierce them and cause substantial harm. People hurling stones can't be stopped, but they can be deflected. One should remember that if someone has the intention to irritate or agitate him or make him angry, and he doesn't react, the former has lost the battle. The offender's power has been stripped off. The ill-intended mission is futile. One must focus one's attention on something else. Shifting attention to something more pleasant will help one forget about the bad experience, comment, or impression about him. Besides, one should try reading uplifting books, learning a new skill, studying, or doing something beneficial. Also, one should maintain a good mindset and try not to worry about what has been said about him. Something inspiring should be watched or read. Besides, one should carefully select a group of acquaintances. Good companions may guide all that what we should be if they have 5 closest friends. If one doesn't want to be that person, he knows what has to be done. Avoidance is often inescapable. All have family members to live with, co-workers and managers to deal with, and people they encounter whose sole objective in life appears to be upsetting others. Once people have their hands on their desks to avoid the barrage of mudslinging, they should consider keeping an open eye on and regulating others' reactions. Responding with rage will aggravate the issue. Sometimes dodging or stepping away is the right approach. However, it is also important to take all possible steps to remove unwanted persons from one's life. One should let others know how he feels, and should stealthily walk away from them. It'll be difficult, but people will be relieved of the concern and stress others are causing them. Dealing with negative comments. Last but not least, social media has an important role to play. It shouldn't matter to anyone if he has more or fewer friends than others. One should never have an issue sharing personal images or posts with others. And also, one shouldn't worry about who is reading them or what people are commenting on the whole day. Sometimes one doesn't like a photograph that he is tagged in if the facial expression isn't all that decent. One should learn to deal with many negative remarks about oneself and move on. It's important to keep in mind that an appropriate evaluation is the order of the day. Negative thoughts and emotions. Cognitive revamping. Have people ever lost their composure and ended up doing something they later came to regret? What if people were so depressed that they couldn't move for the rest of the day? Have people ever been so overwhelmed that they cannot decide what to do today because they are split into umpteen diverse situations? Humans live in a society full of bitter, depressed, stressed out, and violent individuals. Granted, given the various expectations placed on people nowadays, it's logical. However, it's not decent, and it doesn't feel really good. It is where cognitive revamping comes into play. Thinking in a new way is referred to as cognitive revamping or restructuring. This situation also entails reason more clearly, being calmer, and being more optimistic. Some counselors and psychologists employ cognitive therapy to assist patients in coping with sadness, aggression, and anxiety. It works by educating the user to question and understand their thoughts, rather than simply acting on them. Instead of assuming that the individual who just cuts one off on the highway is a jerk who only cares about himself, people should consider that he may be hurrying home to take care of a sick child, or is running late for a crucial appointment. To put it another way, one should give the liberty to the other person to have the benefit of the doubt. Most people are in a hurry or have failed to notice someone on the street and decided to cut him off at some stage. People must give them a chance to cool down by taking a step back and examining the problem more deeply before their rage spirals beyond control. Patients who are depressed may benefit from cognitive restructuring. People who are depressed fervently believe that every element in their domain is horrible and unworthy. Cognitive therapy enables them to question their assumptions and examine the facts more closely. The depressed person will eventually learn that things are not as horrible as they believed, and that those circumstances are actually positive. The negative ideas that pass through their brains are turned into positive affirmations using a method known as reframing. For instance, a depressed individual may believe that he will never be cheerful since he can't drive a car. Reframing teaches the users to rephrase their statements like they are willing to learn to drive a motor car. When used to address anxiety symptoms in neuropatients, cognitive reframing can help reduce the negative commentary that plays through the brain of the emotionally phobic. The patient is trained to question negative beliefs and examine those traits under a lens once more. The patient's inner thought process that everyone is watching him and he is making a fool of himself becomes a more practical idea. When he gets out of the stigma, he can take pride and feel that he can meet new friends and spend a nice time with good intentions. It is not that cognitive remodeling is simple or a speedy process. It always takes time to gather the skills, and it may take even longer to become comfortable with them. Negative ideas and sentiments have a lot of strength, and they're difficult to fragment. However, one may overcome the despair, hostility, and anxiety that now plagues modern life with discipline. It can be materialized by confronting the negative thought processes and turning the negative remarks, including those inside the brain, into positivity. Negative thoughts and emotions. The inherent benefits. Studies have shown that negative affect has significant positive effects on human cognition and conduct. These discoveries have marked a paradigm shift from prior psychological investigations, which have focused exclusively on the beneficial impacts of positive attitudes. Both effective states have a bearing on mental traits and behavior. Negative affect, NA, has cognitive benefits in domains such as perception, memory, judgment, and interpersonal relations. Individuals with negative affect do better in situations involving deceit, manipulation, impression building, and categorization, because negative affect focuses more on sensory processing than underlying wisdom. Positive mood rests on larger conceptual thinking to thematic data that skip the detail, whereas negative affectivity's methodical and thorough processing of data points leads to less reconstructive memory fallacies. As a result, interpreting information negatively minimizes the scope of misinformation effects and helps improve detail precision. While offering information or executing any cognitive work, people also have fewer overlapping input responses. Judgment. People are infamous for making incorrect judgments founded on prejudices and incomplete facts. According to evolutionary postulates, negative emotional states tend to enhance skepticism and lessen dependence on prior information. Consequently, judging accuracy improves impression building, basic attribution error reduction, gullibility elimination, and stereotyping. While the hippocampal element is generally connected with melancholy, it does not have negative side effects as sensations of joy or enthusiasm. Melancholy is associated with a sensation of sadness or grief, whereas exhilaration is associated with an increase in heart rate and pulse. When it comes to making a judgment, most people would consider how they feel about a circumstance. When interrogated, they will immediately go into their current mindset. Some people, however, misunderstand this process when they use their existing mood to explain a response to a stimulus. If people are sad, even if it's just a small bit, their responses and input will almost certainly be negative. Impression building. Although maiden impressions are the most primary forms of judgments that humans make as a daily routine, yet they are a multifaceted and imperfect affair. Negative emotion has been demonstrated to reduce presuppositional impression formation fallacies. The halo effect, or the inclination to generate erroneous perceptions of individuals based on established but unnecessary details, is a prevalent judgment error. According to one school of thought, more handsome people, for example, are frequently associated with more desirable attributes. Positive affect boosts the halo effect, while negative affect minimizes it. A halo effect was discovered in a bid to recognize a middle-aged gentleman as being more apt to be a philosopher than an unorthodox young lady in a study that involved undergraduates. When subjects were engrossed in a negative affect mood, these halo effects were more or less non-existent. Scientists used an autobiographical emotion inducement task, wherein individuals mused about happy or unhappy recollections. Participants were split into happy and sad groups in the study room. The respondents then viewed a philosophical essay, written by a fictitious professor, who could be either a middle-aged male with specs or a young, untraditional woman. The intelligence and competence of the imposter-like writer were assessed. The positive effect subgroup showed a large halo effect, with the male author rated much higher in ability than the female writer. There were essentially no halo effects in the negative effect category that rated the two identically. Negative affect improves impression building, according to the study. Their observations replicate the hypotheses that negative affect leads to more complex processing caused by external and readily available data. Fundamental attribution fallacy. The negative effect causes a meticulous and cautious approach, decreasing basic attribution error or the temptation to incorrectly attribute action to a person's intrinsic character without considering external and contextual elements. Because it occurs when individuals engage top-down cognitive processes based on inferences, the FAE, fundamental attribution error, is linked to positive affect. Negative affect encourages methodical, bottom-up evaluation, which helps decrease fundamental attribution errors. Participants rated a false orator on attitude and relatability based on a paper the debater submitted, which was recorded in FAE data. After being divided into favorable or unfavorable affect groups, students went through one of two plausible essays advocating for one side or the other on an extremely contentious subject. Subjects were apprised of the fact that the debater had been allocated a viewpoint in the article that did not exactly reflect his own opinions. Nonetheless, debaters who advocated controversial positions were regarded by the positive affect categories and had the same mindset as the essay. They were also ranked as dislikable when matched with debaters with popular positions, indicating FAE. In contrast, there was no notable change in ratings for debaters with acceptable stances and debaters with controversial stances in the information for the negative affect group. These findings suggest that positive affect integration styles increase fundamental attribution error, whereas negative affect adaptation styles reduce it when assessing individuals. Stereotyping. By encouraging more attention to stimuli, negative affect helps build judgment by reducing the subconscious usage of stereotypes. When respondents were negatively affected, they were less prone to be biased against targets that appeared to be of other sects. Researchers had students play a computer game after grouping them into favorable and unfavorable affect groups. Respondents had to make quick decisions on whether or not to shoot exclusively at gun-wielding targets. Turbans were worn by some of the targets, giving them a different appearance. There was a strong bias toward turban-wearing targets, which tended to fire at them. Persons in negative affective states, on the other hand, showed a decline in this pattern. Turban-wearing subjects developed more excessive violent tendencies in positive affect groups. Researchers discovered that negative affect causes people to rely less on internal preconceptions, resulting in reduced judgmental prejudice. Gullibility. In multiple researches, negative affectivity has been found to help increase skepticism and decrease gullibility. Individuals in negative affective states can identify deception as negative affective states improve external examination and strong attention to detail. Researchers discovered that pupils in negative emotional states were better at detecting lies than those in pleasant affective states. Students in a study saw video clips of ordinary individuals telling a lie. To begin, music was employed to elicit a good, negative, or neutral emotional response in subjects. Next, the experimenters aired a bulk of video messages for students to determine whether they were real or false. As anticipated, the negative affect category outperformed the positive affect segment in veracity assessments, which were no better than random. Investigators believed the negative affect groups were more adept at detecting deceit because they paid attention to stimuli aspects and methodically built conclusions from them. Memory. Many flaws in memory have been discovered, influencing the accuracy of retrieved memories. It really has proved particularly useful in criminal cases, when eyewitness recollections have been proven to be less accurate than one might suspect. The proactive environmental and accommodating processing of negative affect, on the other hand, has a favorable influence on total memory retention. It is demonstrated by a decrease in the misinformation effect and the frequency of stated incorrect memories. Although this understanding suggests that negative affect can be utilized to optimize eyewitness memory, yet subsequent study implies that the level to which memory is boosted by negative affect does not alter eyewitness testimonies enough to minimize their inaccuracy considerably. Negative thoughts and emotions, the origin and credence. Emotions originate in Buddhism when an element is deemed pleasant or disagreeable. People are drawn to appealing objects and away from unpleasant or unsafe elements. They have a desire to obtain the stuff, greed, destroy it, hate, escape from it, fear, become fixated or concerned about it, anxiety, and it goes on. In Stoic principles, ordinary emotions such as happiness and fright are regarded as irrational tendencies that arise from erroneous assessments of what is desirable or terrible. Conversely, intelligent people experience positive emotions such as delight and vigilance due to accurate assessments of what is nice and awful. Emotions, according to Aristotle, are core aspects of virtue. All emotional traits, labeled as passions, were thought to correlate to desires or abilities in Aristotelian thought. During the medieval era, in ancient China, scholasticism, particularly Thomas Aquinas, accepted and refined the Aristotelian viewpoint. Extreme emotion was thought to weaken, that alternatively harmed the essential organs. Hippocrates' 4 touches of humor hypothesis, which he popularized, aided in the investigation of emotion in a similar pattern that benefited in the study of medicine. Avicenna thought about the impact of emotions on health and conduct in the primitive 11th century, implying the necessity to handle emotions. Philosophers including René Descartes, Niccolò Machiavelli, Thomas Hobbes, David Hume, and Baruch Spinoza developed pre-modern perspectives on emotion in their publications. Emotions were deemed functional in the 19th century, and they were researched more extensively from an empiricist and psychological standpoint. The Christian viewpoint on emotion assumes that humanity has a theistic basis. God gave mankind the ability to react and interact emotionally when He formed them. The Bible teaches that God is an individual who experiences and communicates emotion. While a somatic view places the core of emotions in the physical presence, a Christian philosophy of emotions views the body as a framework for sensing and expressing feelings. As a result, emotions originate from the human being, or from that which is termed as imago Dei, or God's image in humanity. Emotions, according to Christian belief, can be governed by logical meditation. That rational reflection is also a divine symbol of God, who created the human mind. The objective of emotions in human existence is encapsulated in the divine invention to embrace the Almighty and creation. Human beings are to appreciate, learn from, and use emotions to stimulate self-conduct. Many people are unable or unwilling to notice or acknowledge their negative emotions. Perhaps they've never been taught how to deal with them positively. As a result, they treat their emotions in a range of ways. Some people simply try to ignore them, or entirely shut them off by intoxication, or feeding themselves unnecessarily, or even not eating. Some individuals act on their emotions almost instinctively, expressing or doing things they subsequently regret. None of these responses ever yields a beneficial result. The first thing people must remember is that while they may not always control what emotions occur to them, they can always control how they respond. Individuals can learn to keep their cool and control their emotions. The human response is frequently based on the self-realization of an occurrence, which can be extremely different when they feel self-assured and good about themselves versus unfortunate ones. Consequently, one must exercise control over the thoughts that any incident will prompt, as well as the implications that may crop up owing to the event, particularly if it is connected to human feelings of self-esteem. It is important to remember that people's emotions can assist them in dealing with several contexts. One must respond positively to any area of emotional responses one may have. The only way to do so is to understand what situations provoke what kind of emotional response in human beings, and to what extent and how one wants to be trained to deal with them. Anger, grief, fear, and pleasure are the four primary emotional categories that touch every human being. Individuals will feel more in command of themselves and more competent in handling diverse situations if they realize their reactions and work on regulating and controlling them. Unfortunately, people talking about others, making negative comments, are something everyone has to cope with. It's something one stays away from. One can't stop other people's comments from coming out of their mouths. Besides, one doesn't have any control over what others say. People can sit behind a computer screen and publish anonymous posts on a blog or a social forum about someone or something they do not really like. People might attack one another on Instagram, Facebook, or other social media platforms. It appears that everyone is an arbitrator. One has to handle constant judgment, since it appears like everyone raises a finger at everyone else. Someone is always criticizing anything others do, such as how one dresses up, speaks, or carries oneself. It can sometimes feel like everything is done to alleviate people. One can help them out, do them favors, try to be pleasant, and drive them around. However, no matter what one does, he never manages to gain the favor of others. When someone appears to be able to do a lot for someone else, but he does not perform that one favor for them, they may turn against the benefactor, or bring it up when it is least expected.